Is everybody here, Kate?
Yep.
All right.
Great to see so many faces out here. Wow.
Welcome, everybody. We're going to give it just 1 minute and then we'll get started. I just want to make sure folks have time to come into the space. All right, I think that we can go ahead and get started. My name is Juliet Fink-Yates. You are in a webinar from the Technology Learning Collaborative, TLC, around digital navigation. If you are not here for that, this is a great moment to, step away and do something else. But if you are here for that, welcome. We're excited to have you. I am the co-chair of the Technology Learning Collaborative. I'm also the Digital Inclusion Fellow for the City of Philadelphia. My other co-chair, Andy Stutzman, is a panelist on this webinar, and I'll introduce our panelists in a moment. But I wanted to say a few words about the Technology Learning Collaborative. So for the past 6 years, the Technology Learning Collaborative, or TLC, has been a volunteer-led and supported professional organization for those doing digital inclusion work in Philadelphia, and has really been able to bring folks together around a number of different topics that involve digital literacy, digital inclusion, computer refurbishing, all sorts of things. We typically have hosted a yearly conference, which we did not host this year, but we have started our webinar series this spring to kind of make sure that the best practices since COVID have really shined a light on, because there are so many amazing things that people have been doing in Philadelphia since the pandemic began in this particular space. So you are all welcome to join the Technology Learning Collaborative. We have a Google group and we send out information, and you are all welcome as members to post information yourselves around digital inclusion or digital literacy to that Google group and share information about the programs that you are running or doing as well. And we will send that out to you at the end of this webinar. The other thing I wanted to mention about Technology Learning Collaborative is that we are incorporating. So we are going to become a nonprofit, a 501c3, and we have a small board of members that will have their first meeting in the next week. And so as we become a nonprofit, we'll be looking to engage you all in some other work. It might be committees around planning new programs, doing our annual conference. We are always eager to include more folks in this space. On that note, I will introduce the folks who will be presenting today. So the first person who you'll hear from is Stephanie Orlando. Stephanie is the Innovation Coordinator for the City of Philadelphia. Her team, which sits within the Office of Innovation and Technology, aims to create and sustain a culture of innovation within municipal government. She received her MPA from University of Pennsylvania Fell's Institute of Government in 2019. And then prior to moving to Philadelphia for graduate school, Stephanie lived in Atlanta, Georgia, and worked in the nonprofit education space. Stephanie's going to do a bit of an overview of the Digital Navigator program as it stands right now. And then we're going to hear from 3 additional people who have been running Digital Navigator programs. So I'm going to introduce those folks as well now and then hand it off to Stephanie. So our other panelists include Kieran Farrell. Kieran has been a student support case manager and career coach at Community Learning Center for 10 years. She works to support adult learners to manage their academic and career pathways, assisting with barrier reduction, transition to post-secondary education, job training, and providing career coaching, job readiness, and digital literacy instruction. She served as a digital navigator since the program's inception in April 2020 and manages CLC's PHLConnectED outreach initiatives. Andy Stutzman, who is my co-chair in TLC, has also had a large role in the Digital Navigator work. And Andy is a technologist with experience in workforce development, digital badging, web development, STEM education, and instructional technology. He is the project director for civic technology with Drexel's Excite Center. He is also the co-chair, as I said, of the Technology Learning Collaborative. And we also have Cooper Richardson. Cooper is a community programs associate at CMAC Inc., where she works as a digital navigator and assists in hunger relief programming. Cooper has previously worked as an ESL instructor and studied international relations in university. So we have an excellent group of panelists who've all been really deeply doing this work. So I'm going to turn it over to Stephanie Orlando to give you an overview of this program.
Thank you, Juliet, and thank you for having me. I'm excited to speak with all of you. So I'm going to give a quick overview of the Digital Navigators program before each of the organizations have a chance to speak a little bit more in depth about the work that they've been doing. And Kate, I know you're controlling the slides, so I'll just kind of like say next as you need to scoot through them. And I'm going to keep an eye on the time because I've got about 10 minutes to go through this. And then I'm sure there might be time at the end for questions. So you can go to the next slide, Kate. So generally who the digital navigators are, and again, they're each on the call, so they'll get to talk more about their individual programs, but the Digital Navigator program came about kind of quickly after the start of COVID last spring and early summer. The Digital Literacy Alliance, or the DLA as it's called, is kind of a cross-sector coalition of stakeholders, including people from the city of Philadelphia, folks in nonprofits, corporations, a bunch of different stakeholders across the city who all sit together and focus on issues of digital equity and digital inclusion in the city. And the DLA has a grant program that we run every year. And so last summer, after COVID started, we decided to put together a fast-tracked grant cycle to focus on COVID relief. And this program and idea for Digital Navigators came about through that. So we put together an application and a grant cycle to focus on this idea of digital navigation. If you look at the left hand of the slide, it kind of outlines what really we thought a digital navigator would serve. And the the DLA funded 3 organizations that are on this call today. And then we also now have 3 additional organizations serving as digital navigators that are funded through additional private donations. And you can go to the next slide, Kate. And so our idea of how digital navigators would assist families, there's obviously an endless array of topics that people could call in for support on, but the main issues that we assumed the digital navigators would be assisting families with were kind of what you see outlined on this slide. So mainly people who need help connecting to the internet, folks calling with help with troubleshooting issues that they're having once they are connected to the internet. If a lot of people were transitioning to this new lifestyle of working and having class from home, and so trying to orient caregivers on how this new system of digital technology works and getting accustomed to that, supporting people with just any sort of online forms, online processes, the census, the election, all these things that we're kind of transitioning to this whole new virtual space. As well as referring families to digital literacy and helping enroll them in Comcast Internet Essentials or other internet programs as well. This, again, is not like an exclusive list of things that digital navigators help with, but is a lot of the bulk of the work that they do to assist families. Okay, Kate, you can go to the next one. I'm not going to spend too much time on this slide because, again, I know we have some navigators on the call, but 2 ways to reach them. and I assume that these links will be sent out at some point, but you can call or dial 211 to be connected to a navigator, or contact each of these programs directly. All of them have helplines that are either hotlines or warm lines, depending on their hours. And so someone can give a call to the navigators directly and either leave a message or speak with someone right away. And they also all have email addresses set up for folks to send an email if they need help with something specifically. All right, the next slide. Okay, so I want to go through a little bit of the data that we've kind of collected from our organizations over the past several months that this program's been launched. Most of the data that I'm going to go through was collected from in quarters 1 and 2 from June to December, and I'll mention any exceptions to that. Again, this was like a very fast track grant cycle. So the beginning of this whole process kind of came together really quickly. And I can honestly say, I don't think it would have been as successful if we hadn't had the incredible organizations that we have on this call doing the work. And they really came together to, whatever the phrase is, like build the plane as we're flying it in a lot of ways, with especially this data collection. We wanted to be able to get an idea of what people were calling about, what they were helping folks with the most, where we were being able to serve people. And so we kind of built this like data collection system as we were going, and they've been doing an incredible job of really just not only assisting people, but giving us a really full idea of who and where they're serving as well. So some key takeaways we've had over the past several months. One of the main obvious things that the navigators are tracking is how many total unique callers or tickets they're having. And so we had 329 total unique tickets as of December of last year. So again, this data, we have almost 3 full months of data that we haven't included in these slides, but as of the end of December, there were about 329 people who were called, 405 total caller touch points, and that piece of data was actually only collected in the second quarter, and so that number would actually be significantly higher. Again, people are calling into these Digital Navigator hotlines and not only getting help right away on the phone, but a lot of it involves following back up with someone over the course of weeks or days or months potentially. And so we really wanted to capture not only the number of unique callers and individuals that are being supported, but also how many times navigators are following back up with those folks, because the work they do is really time intensive and really important. And so just the sheer number of touch points that they have is very impressive. And then successfully completed cases, 156 successfully completed cases as of December. Again, we have 3 more months to loop into this as well. And really one of the biggest things that I think we've seen come out of this program is just the number of individuals who have been able to receive devices through our digital navigators, not only calling to say, I need a device, can you get me in touch with one, but also just our navigator organizations reaching out to folks to say, like, we've received some new devices, can we get them in your hands? I think this picture from CLC, or this collage of pictures that they provided us in their mid-year report, is incredible, and it just shows how happy folks are to actually get these devices in their hands. So I'll let them talk more about that. You can go to the next slide, Kate. This is a little bit of an overview of what callers were helped with most frequently. So again, in terms of those, like what we deem successfully completed calls, someone calling in for support on a specific issue, and our navigators working with them, you know, over the course of however long it takes to successfully complete that call or that ticket. You'll see there's kind of a range of topics that most people call in for support on. And this was not shocking to us. A lot of people need devices. A lot of people need help with working through specific online tasks. We've had a number of folks who were successfully referred to or enrolled in digital literacy programs. And because a couple of our organizations have these programs already within their organizations, this has been an added benefit of just being able to be on the phone with someone and say, can we actually refer you to a program we have, or refer you to another organization and get you enrolled in that as well. Since PHLConnectED was launched, towards the end of last summer, we've also had a lot of folks calling in for help with that. But those two pieces at the bottom with successfully helping people resolve PHL-connected issues and enrolled in PHL-connected, those are data points that were only collected in the second quarter as well, which is why the numbers are potentially a little lower. You can go to the next slide, Kate. And then just some other insights that we got from the data that we collected from the navigators. We've had a number of people call in for support with specific languages, and going through the data, this is a list of some of the languages that people have requested. A lot of pieces, you know, when someone calls in for support from one of the navigators, they're not necessarily asking a form, going through multiple questions on a form. Sometimes it's just a very natural and authentic conversation. And so I do want to note that some of these fields were not collected for all of the callers, and it's potentially numbers might potentially be higher than they are reflected on this screen. But number of households with K through 12 students was a particularly interesting piece of information for us, given the work that the navigators do trying to connect folks with the PHL-connected resources and help them through those issues. Again, we're trying to be of service to as many people across Philadelphia as possible. And so knowing how many callers are reaching out for support who consider themselves to be in low-income households is also another piece of interesting information. And then we did start tracking the average time per call it took to successfully complete a case in our second quarter. And so as you'll see, there's a lot of back and forth, and being able to resolve an issue within under 10 days is a really impressive feat from all of our organizations. I think there's only one more slide, Kate. This is just a map of the zip codes that were served. And so it is a little small, I apologize, but if you'll see the different colors circling the zip codes are an indication of how many callers from each of those zip codes we had between, again, June and December. So that these numbers might look different now, but they're kind of concentrated in different pockets. But the zip codes that are circled in blue are where we saw the most calls coming in. And then there's a few zip codes that are not pictured as well. There might be one more slide, I'm not sure. Okay. Again, I don't want to go into too much detail because all of these organizations are on this call to share more specifically, but we did have our digital navigators that were funded submit mid-year reports, just kind of looking back on the experience that they've had over the past several months and reflecting on the work that they've done. And I think it's pretty incredible to see just like the wide range of people that they've been able to serve, the wide topics that they've been able to kind of help folks through. I saw something come up in the chat, and I think that these slides will potentially be shared at the end, so you'll be able to kind of like read through this, but I don't want to go into details because I'm not sure what CLC and Drexel and CMAC are going to be talking through, and I don't want to steal anyone's thunder to share a story, but yeah, that's just an overview of our data. I feel like I've spit all of that out at you, so I'm happy to answer questions in the chat afterwards or at the end. But we're really proud to work with all of these organizations and really excited to see the impact that they've had across the city. So I hope this was interesting for everyone else to see as well.
Thanks, Steph. I want to ask folks to put any questions in the chat, but I'm going to hold them for the moment. We're going to get to questions after our actual digital navigator orgs. Each are going to present just a few minutes about the way that they've structured their programs, because each one is sort of a different model. And so they each have had set it up a little bit differently that we thought might be valuable for you to hear about. So we'll go to Community Learning Center, to Kieran, to talk about how they structured their program.
Great, thanks, Juliet. Hi, everybody. Again, my name's Kieran. I'm a student support coordinator at CLC. And I'm just going to kind of talk a little bit about how we developed our digital navigation program, and how we support digital access and literacy if you're enrolled in our program. CLC is an adult literacy agency. So we work with folks who are looking to either upskill if they've been out of school for a really long time to get into job training programs, or most of our folks are looking to earn their high school diploma. Kate, do we have some slides from CLC? Whenever you're ready. So the digital navigation process, basically, we have already established front desk staff. So our hotline is our regular number that folks would call to receive some support, whether it's, so we're getting calls from folks who are interested in adult literacy classes or looking for digital navigation assistance. So we sort of tease that out when they call. Our front desk staff asks a couple basic questions about what kind of needs they have. Most of our folks are calling for both things. They're looking for, a device. They're looking for digital navigation support, internet access, and interested in enrolling in our classes. So once that information is taken, we sort of set up our own in-house, software tracking system where then that information gets sent to our two digital navigation folks on staff. It's myself and our other student support coordinator. So we call the folks back and talk to them about what their situation is, what their needs are, and then we sort of start that process. And I think as Stephanie mentioned, it is definitely a process. It's an ongoing, back and forth to make sure that folks were able, we're not just making referrals to, Comcast or to 211. We're, making sure that they were actually able to follow up. And if they're having any issues following up, that we're checking back in with them to really support, a positive outcome. So at this point also, we check in and see, depending on how many devices we have, we're able to help provide free devices to folks as well. As long as they're low income, looking to use them for employment purposes or education purposes. That's sort of the policy we set, so that we sort of made sure those devices were going to folks that were, looking to use them for those goals. Next slide, Kate, thanks. Yeah, so just sort of a little bit about the process through CLC. Once they are enrolled with us, they'll go through, either an online registration process or by phone if they don't have access to technology at that point. Then they'll go through our intake and assessment process. And again, a lot of that can be done remotely if they have access to technology. If not, we'll work around that until we're able to help set them up with a device and internet. And then they go through an online orientation process. So they're building like digital literacy skills throughout the process of going through our program. And then they're placed in our classes. And again, right now, all of our classes are online. So they're learning how to download different apps, different learning digital remote learning platforms, as well as obviously Zoom and Google Meets. So they're building all those skills as they go. And digital navigators are available as well during that process to help support that one-on-one intensive skill building that's needed, and also refer them into our digital literacy classes. We run weekly workshops that help support that as well. With the goal that they'll finish up our program, meet their academic and career goals, but also have developed some key technology skills along the way. So that's it. I think the last slide is just sort of, this is just sort of an outline of the different, online platforms and resources that are, that we try to make available to our learners to help build their digital literacy skills in the classroom. I think that's all I had.
Thanks, Karen. I think that's a great overview. We have a couple questions that I'm going to hold again for a second, and then we'll go to Andy to talk about his program, and then CMAC, and then we'll open up to some questions.
Hi, I'm Andy Stutzman. I'm the project director for Civic Technology at Drexel's Excite Center. And as a Karen, we started back in end of April, beginning of May with the Digital Navigator program. And I should probably have paid attention to my instructions about what we should present on, because Karen was excellent. I feel like her slides were so good. We can go to the next slide, Kate. So, yeah, so who are we serving? So if anyone knows much about what the work that Drexel's been doing, that's actually a typo. It's should be the West Philly Promise Zone. That is the area, basically 19104 zip code out in West Philly. The Promise Neighborhood grant, the Promise Neighborhood is the actual grant that's serving that, and we work directly with that grant And that's where we get a lot of our connections with and understand the needs of the community, as well as we work with multiple partners in that area, as well as civic organizations and churches, everything else out there. So we get a lot of our connections through the West Philly Promise Neighborhood Grant. But we're serving, and these are kind of areas that I was expecting some of these, but not all of them. So adult learners, that was actually who our first set of callers were back in May. And that was as the students were kind of being met, most of the needs are being met by the school district. We had a lot of adult learners calling and saying, hey, I was taking GED classes, I was taking such and such classes, and now I need a computer, and now I need help support for this. Veterans, we connected with the Veterans Association. I think we've given out 5 to 6 computers to veterans in particular. The seniors, families, maybe they only had 1 computer for the family, they needed additional ones. Civic organizations as well. So as we are taking phone calls in, and I'll get to this, how we're actually doing this a little bit. But one of the groups that was really highlighted were the civic organizations, mainly because a lot of them are led by retirees in the area. And those retirees, we found out, did not have a computer, did not have internet, or did not have the skills, or all three. They don't have the skills to do Zoom. So that is one area that we are really focusing on right now. Then the other area is small businesses, and that's an area that Excite Center in particular has been focusing on for a while now, as we have a relationship with small businesses in Lancaster Avenue, and along with Lancaster Avenue 21st Century Business Association. We've been building websites for small businesses, so we had a great connection there. And we connected with a child care center. We're going to be providing a desktop computer for them, so the families can use that when they come in, or the students can use it as well. We can go to the next slide. Yep, so these are the things we talked about already, like what are we assisting with? The one thing that's a little bit unique is that we were actually, you can probably saw through that picture initially, with some of the 3 students from Penn helped us supply not just computers, but they actually did fundraising for over $3,000. So we could include USB headsets and web cameras for all the computers. The web cameras go with the desktop computers. And one thing that we found out why that was necessary, it's not just for Zoom. I mean, particularly for Zoom, but also for GED students right now who are doing the GED online testing. You need a web camera, it's required. You also cannot use a Chromebook. So those are some of the things we've learned through this process as well. And we're offering basic tech support. We have recently connected with JEVS Human Services, as they have been leading an IT pre-apprenticeship training with folks in with the West Philadelphia community. And with that, they have formed what's called Help Desk PHL. So we are connecting with them right now. So anyone that calls for technical support will be forwarded to Help Desk PHL, who has live students or operators that'll be answering calls. And that's really for, I can't get this application to work. I don't know how to create an email address. I don't, basically, tech things that our students don't, our operators basically don't necessarily have all those skills, but these folks have the skills there for that. And the 2 last things there are unique things that we've just picked up on, which are really huge, actually, digital literacy needs right now. COVID-19 vaccine registration and the kindergarten registration. And these are things that are really highlighted through this program that we've noticed, is that, if you don't have a computer right now, it's impossible to register for the vaccine. I mean, there is a phone number you can call, but to get the information you need quickly and to get the vaccine, you really need to have a computer. So we're assisting people with that right now. And also with kindergarten registration as well. That's all online right now. And you have to be able to upload multiple forms online, and maybe you only have a phone to do that. So how do you do that on a phone? So those are the things that we're also assisting with right now. Go to the next slide. Yep. So this is where we are a little bit unique, being a university, is that we are using either part-time students paid from the grant or work study students, which is great. And those work study students are either coming from, we posted a job position at Drexel for students, but we also are working with the Lindy Center for Civic Engagement, where we have what are called Drexel Community Scholars. And those are students that are either signing up for additional volunteer activities, or if they want to use their work study for civic engagement as well. And they can do that. So that has been just kind of a boon to us, where it saves us some costs and we get some great students assisting with that. We've also had 2 students from Penn that have volunteered with us over the course of the Navigators program. which has been great. At the moment, I think we are up to 11 different people that we've trained. As with a lot of university students come and go, especially at Drexel, when we have our co-op system, Drexel students leave after 6 months often. So we've had about 11 different folks that we have trained. Right now, we have 3 different people that are navigators that are answering calls right now. We do not answer calls live. We are just like the warm line, as Juliet mentioned. So people can call, leave us a message, email us, or text us as well, and we'll get back to them on that. Go to the next one. So our biggest focus in the last couple months really has been computer distribution. So we've been able to give out so far 51 desktops, and that is with coordination. That includes some desktops that were from people's emergency centers. So they had some of their own that they've been giving out, and we partnered with them on that. Plus they were initially the ones that were helping us with the distribution as well. They had a kind of a setup already where they could leave the package for a desktop computer in their conference room, and people can come to the main door and basically socially distance, be able to sign in, walk into that conference room, take the box with them, and leave. So that was a great setup, especially early on in the pandemic when we weren't quite sure how we were going to manage that. And then we've also been giving out computers lately from the Excite Center, our office at 34th Street. And then the other one is through a pre-apprenticeship training, I mentioned with Jeb's Human Services. We worked with a group called NerdIt Foundation. The pre-apprentice training, they needed actually computers to work on as part of the training itself. It wasn't just that the students needed a computer for the training. They actually, so that as part of the instruction, they needed a computer to actually complete the training. So we worked with NerdIt Foundation to get 20 different desktop computers for those students. So that was a great boon for us as well. Then we also have distributed 33 Chromebooks. Some of those are from Helpdesk PHL. So coming out of that pre-apprenticeship training, they formed a Helpdesk PHL, and they refurbished multiple Chromebooks. I believe it was 15 different Chromebooks, and they provided those actually to our civic organizations. So all of those went to I think split up between 3 or 4 different civic organizations within West Philly. Then again, Excite Center, we actually used some of the funds from the Digital Navigator programs. Most of the programs received $5,000 as part of the grant to actually buy equipment for distribution as well. And I mentioned that computers are sourced from it. Drexel University, the IT department has been great. We had several desktops. I think it was 13 desktops initially at the beginning of the pandemic. Drexel IT actually prepped for us and gave it to us. Then we also, through the Hahnemann Hospital closing, we had a bunch of different, bunch of desktops that were left over from that. So we have over 100 desktops that are kind of waiting to be refurbished, and we've been working on that slowly. Then the NerdIt Foundation, again, they provided computers for the pre-apprenticeship training, but also provided us with 15 desktops and 10 Chromebooks the other week. They did a big drop off for all the Digital Navigator programs a couple weeks ago. Then Jeb's Human Services, that's the Helpdesk PHL, and then through the Digital Navigator funds. Yeah.
Thank you, Andy. Yeah. That was a great overview. You guys have done so much incredible work distributing computers. So I want to give CMAC some time, and then we'll get into some questions.
Sure. Okay. Thank you so much, Julia. Hi, my name is Cooper Richardson. I am a Community Programs Associate at CMAC, and I generally am our lead digital navigator. So CMAC is traditionally, we're a social services organization. And we serve immigrants and refugees and other marginalized communities. And since the start of COVID, a lot of our work has shifted to kind of address those needs that have come up, partly through hunger relief and also through our Digital Navigator program. So you can go ahead and flip the next slide, Kate. Thank you. So our Digital Navigator program, we address a whole wide variety of different issues, helping people sign up for affordable internet, getting a free or a low-cost computer or tablet device, basic troubleshooting of the internet connection, of setting up a computer, that kind of thing. And we can also refer elsewhere for more advanced technical issues. We've done a lot of helping people just complete specific online tasks, like downloading Zoom, making an email account, and then also referring folks to digital literacy resources and adult education classes. CMAC offers ESL as well as digital literacy classes. So we do a lot of that. And then overall, we just, we act as exactly what it says. We're navigators, so we try and help our clients find the resources that they need to solve the problem that they're having. And you can flip to the next slide. Thanks, Kate. And our model, we are also a kind of a warm line, a helpline where people call in, leave a message, send an email, and we will get back to them within 1 to 2 business days. Currently, on our team, we have myself as well as an intern who manage most of the incoming calls. We also have some digital service fellows who help, and we also have the ability to recruit volunteers if needed, depending on the volume of calls we're getting. We receive a lot of our callers as referrals from other community organizations in Philadelphia, and as well as from within CMAC, from our outreach workers and our ESL instructor. Yeah, and so for our software, we use the Zendesk ticketing system and a Google Voice number to take in calls and kind of handle incoming requests. And CMAC particularly, we do serve any zip code in Philadelphia, but we're particularly well equipped to work with people with language needs. Myself and our other main digital navigators speak Spanish. We also use LanguageLine to offer assistance for any other language needs. So we have telephone interpretation available. And the vast majority of our callers thus far are people with language needs. I'd say probably 80 to 90%. So we work with a lot of diverse communities. And you can go ahead and flip, Kate. Thank you. Yeah, and this entire past year or so since we started Digital Navigators has been very much trial and error, and much like any pilot program, just kind of figuring out what works as we go. We started out with a hotline model where we would answer calls live, and found that it's more efficient to have folks call, leave a message, and we'll get back to them in a short amount of time. We've gone through some trial and error with our ticketing system, and overall we found that patience is very much a virtue with digital navigators, because a lot of our callers have language barriers or a low level of digital literacy, or both, and that makes it a pretty intensive, slow process of getting people to where they need to be to access the resources that they need. So we spend a lot of time really just working one-on-one and walking our callers through the very low level things to get them, downloading Zoom so that they can access an online course, or creating an email so that they can download Zoom, and really intensive kind of step-by-step things. And then I just wanted to share a couple of resources that we've found really helpful. Comcast Internet Essentials has been a great program for many of our clients. We also worked a lot with PCs for People, which is a company that offers low-cost devices. Their threshold level of income for eligibility is much higher than a lot of places. So we've been able to get a lot of devices from them for our callers. And then it's also been very helpful to have kind of an in-house place to refer people for digital literacy instruction, as well as ESL classes. And I think that's everything. So thank you so much, Kate.
Thanks, Cooper. So before I have a handful of questions, but that I'm going to ask the speakers, but a couple came up. So I just want to make mention that Digital Navigator helplines from these organizations are open to everyone in the city of Philadelphia. And you can see they've also taken calls from outside of the city as well on occasion, but they are stood up to support any resident in Philadelphia. And they were set up to be located, Drexel's Excite Center is in West Philadelphia, CMAC's in South Philadelphia, and CLC's in North Philadelphia. And some of our other groups that we have, Inglis, for example, who's not on this call, provides support for people with disabilities, for example. So they can serve a wide variety of folks in the city. This question is really interesting. So I want to ask the Digital Navigators, has anyone used or had success with software that allows the technical assistant to take over the device of the caller or student and walk them through the problem resolution process?
We have not at CLC.
I have not used any software. I have a couple of times done like helped them to share a screen on Zoom, so I can kind of just point and walk them to like through creating an email account or something like that.
Yeah, I would say that like maybe 2% of our calls are usually around technical assistance for those types of problems where you might need that service. I've used those in the past for other things I've done in the past, but yeah, for the most part, most people are calling for a computer or for internet access. So being able to share the screen is a very limited problem that we see.
So speaking of sort of problems, what are some of the unexpected challenges that you each encountered when you set up your programs?
I would say for Drexel, and I think this is probably true for everyone else, is the amount of telephone tag you're playing sometimes. I expected some of that, but not as much as it actually is, especially when it's not a live, and it's hard to have a live caller as well, or have a live operator answering at all hours. So that makes it even more difficult in some ways. But yeah, the number of times it takes to get people to call back is difficult.
Yeah, I'd just say also, I mean, I think, we started this at just such a period of acute challenge for people. So, someone will call about needing some assistance with obtaining the internet, and then they start talking about, other challenges that they're experiencing, needing help filling out unemployment claims or some other type of government form that they were prior, trying to do with their phone before, which is, it's really difficult to fill out a government form on a cell phone. So, sort of just kind of taking apart all the different layers of challenges that folks are having and helping them navigate, navigate those issues. So it's definitely, a time consuming, process to really help those folks get to where they need to be. So, time consuming, lots of different resources that you're utilizing. So, I'd say that's probably one of the more difficult challenges. Another one we've experienced is just sort of, depending on where we were, what funding we were utilizing, it changed how many devices we had or when they were coming in. So sort of always just the constant follow-up, like last week we had to refer somebody for a low-cost device to an outside agency. This week we got devices. So then trying to catch back up with those folks to, set up that exchange and things like that. So, just things have sort of been changing as we've gone, which can be a little bit of a challenge.
I would also say one of the biggest unexpected pieces that I generally can say is the lack of calls in some ways. We were expecting floods of calls. We advertised like crazy. I was actually in, multiple newsletters out there, all digital, but also we worked with People's Emergency Center to get our information out there. And the newsletter went out to 5,000 households in West Philly. Like I was expecting a flood of calls. I was training like 5 or 6 digital navigators to work on this, but then you're getting 4 or 5 calls a week to start off with. Some weeks we've had 2 or 3 calls. It's taken a year really for the information together and to earn that trust from the community. So we're up, I think we've had three calls today alone. So we're getting close to 10 to 15 calls a week sometimes now, which is great. But just the amount of time it took really to get that trust and that information out there for the community to actually call us, it took a lot longer than I expected.
Cooper, do you want to add to that? Those are great. Thank
Yeah,
you.
I second just about everything that y'all just said. We've had a lot of challenges with those. I'd also say just in kind of the learning process of having to get really creative in how to help someone when you can't be there with them to help them. Whether that's, sharing your screen on Zoom or, trying to do a video call and have them show their computer screen on the phone, and just being really creative in how you're able to help someone.
So speaking of sort of marketing and and outreach. Andy, you sort of touched on this a little bit, but we have a question about that. What has been effective, do you all think, for marketing, and how can we support your outreach efforts to our audiences and communities?
I think Drexel, I'm a little bit unique. We don't actually have a client list like CLC or someone else, like folks that you've been working with to advertise. So I've had to really go out to different programs that are out there, whether they're Drexel-based programs or other nonprofits that are in the area, to really have them help me with the advertising. So, so that was a little bit where we were unique with that piece of it. Yeah, I can't remember the rest of your question.
It was around how could folks on the call or other people, CBOs, other nonprofits help support outreach efforts to our audiences and communities. What would you say to them? What could they do?
Yeah, one thing that actually has helped me is actually talking to the actual civic organizations and getting the word out there. So they're talking to more people in their neighborhood, on their block, and that has helped a lot as well. So that's something that if you are part of one of those organizations in Philly, getting that information out, locally is helpful.
Yeah, I mean, to Andy's point, we do have a pretty, our first outreach efforts were really to our own student population. And, they have their own connection. So, we have people calling in from wherever for classes, and we're able to make sure they, have the digital technology that they need. But then also, we have our students sort of doing a lot of the outreach and marketing for us. So I think that's been helpful getting the word out there, especially with the PHLConnectED program.
Yeah, we've done a lot of outreach to like local schools as well as to community organizations. And I think word of mouth, especially in like the community that CMAC serves, plays a huge role. Like once one person knows about it, then you'll get 5 calls the next day from, that person's neighbors or classmates.
That is great. Some old-fashioned methods, non-internet based methods. So what are some unexpected, what have you all learned and what has been successful in getting folks connected to the internet? And sort of conversely, where has it been particularly challenging to get internet access?
I'll jump in and I'll just say, I think what's been, really helpful is making like this program having people who are going to follow up with these people about the challenges. So one of the biggest challenges we've seen is, depending on people's living situations, getting them set up with the internet, with internet essentials, for example, can be a challenge. Folks could be in a room with an apartment that Comcast doesn't have registered as that it exists. So they'll say, they can't get it there, or they'll have someone else in the building will have the internet, and then Comcast will deny them because it'll say it already exists there. So, a lot of times people just, they've waited online to get denied, you know what I mean? Like it can get discouraging. So, I think having somebody to encourage them to call back, call with them, advocate for them, explain the situation, I think that has been very helpful. And I definitely have seen a few situations where folks would not have followed through if they didn't have that support.
Yeah, I'd have to agree. We've come across a lot of those issues as well. But the city has an escalation form, which has been really helpful for us as well. So that, and Comcast has been very responsive to any issues that get put into that form. So if someone has some of the exact same issues, where there's already an account associated with that house and they had just moved in or whatever that might be, I've seen some great responsiveness for that as too. So, but those are definitely some of the issues. And I've had some people that don't want to. They just want to stick with their cell phone and try and use the internet like that. So actually, even and a lot of this kind of goes into this point as well. And with a lot of the veterans that are calling us, a lot of things like $10 a month is still hard for them. Even it's the best rate in town, but it's still really hard for them to do. So that is something we've experienced as well, and that's difficult to know how to solve.
Yeah, anybody with a non-traditional living situation, it's a little bit harder to get them connected, especially when a lot of like Comcast will ask for like a proof of address if there's someone who's been there before who had an account. And not everybody has a formal lease that they can show. And sometimes you revert to like finding a hotspot or something like that in place of normal.
So what have you
internet.
all done in those situations?
I've helped a few people get a hotspot from the same company that we get a lot of our computer devices from. Just a hotspot, and it's worked out, especially for a household with only 1 or 2 people.
Yeah, we've not had a lot of resources for that, unfortunately. We did help out. I'm trying to think. Yeah, no, we don't have any hotspots like that. So we really need funding for hotspots would be wonderful. That's something to think about for the future, to be able to offer those as well.
What about some of the ways in which you all have done an enormous amount of effort helping people, and it seems like are largely successful, but are there ways in which you have found that you can't help people, and what does that look like? For example, we've talked a little bit about internally, so I'll prompt this around tech support, what tech support really means and how far you can go with somebody around their technical support needs.
The harder ones that we've found, well, 2 examples. One, you have the person that wants help with everything, and at some point you kind of realize after about the 5th, 6th call that they just want to talk to somebody. So how do you conclude that conversation with them? And that's been difficult in some cases. The other cases, we had someone call us last week who wanted help with their resume, but they're literally calling us from a rotary phone, They don't have a computer, don't have internet, and they don't want either. So how do we help them with that? And I was able to connect them with someone at Drexel that helps with those things, that they can talk over the phone, they could type. They had a handwritten resume, so they're trying to see if they can convert that into something typewritten. So those are the kind of 2 things that we've worked with recently. It's been difficult.
Early on, we had someone who really needed some really basic, really comprehensive assistance with all tech issues. And I actually referred her to Andy's program because they specifically help people, learn how to use an iPhone, for example. And it was just not something that, I had the time to do. I mean, we kind of tried to help her with the basics, but for that really intensive, baseline need, I referred her to a program that can help with that.
Yeah, I haven't run into this as much as I thought it would, but I worry sometimes that like the Digital Navigator, like the concept can be like misconceived as like a really like an IT help desk, and like we aren't that. I'm not that. I can help with getting things set up and getting, referring elsewhere for more advanced help, but I can't really fix a computer from where I am.
Thank you, guys. So we'll need to wrap up soon. So I will see if there's any other questions that folks have. And if not, sort of final words from each of you about what advice would you give to this group if folks want to begin offering digital navigation services? A couple words of advice from each of you. Maybe start with Cooper.
Sure. I think I said this in my slides, but definitely just patience is a virtue, and none of this is like a one and done, touch and go kind of thing. It takes a lot of interactions with each person to get them the help that they need.
How about Karen? Do you have your thoughts around what advice you would give?
Yeah, I mean, similarly, I think, really looking at what your community's needs are, what specific things are areas of need, where are the gaps, and maybe sort of designing a program that really focuses in on those areas, I think might be helpful for just as a starting point for organizations to know where to begin.
Yeah, and I would say don't be afraid of the technology. Really, the number of calls we get about actually using technology, like help with email, things like that, is very limited. So if you don't have that technology background of like desktop support, don't be afraid of this. You can always refer them out to someone else, one of the other programs that might have that information if you want to. But really, it's just referring information, helping them fill out a form online, registering for email or registering for internet, those types of things. It's not really you don't have to be super technically savvy to actually answer the questions that folks are having. You just need the information. So that I would say just don't be wary of that.
Great advice from all of you. I want to thank Stephanie Orlando and Karen Farrell and Andy Stutzman and Cooper Richardson for joining us at this webinar today, and you all for coming here. We put in the chat a form just for your feedback. So if you have a minute and are able to click on that and fill out the feedback for this webinar, we'd love that. And we will follow up with everybody on this who attended with slides and more information. Again, you're always welcome to ask more questions by emailing any of us, and we will try to get you your answers.
And thank you to Kate for organizing all of this. Kate Rivera, thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
Thanks.